You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Friday for the second straight time. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where does your team every day, almost every day, a couple times, maybe not every day. Some days, nothing. Some days, twice. That's how we roll. So I need an assistant to get my schedule all in order. Anyway, I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And I was hoping that on the preview we would listen to some of what I talked to Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart about. However, the audio is not fit for consumption, so that's not going to happen. But we're going to preview this Michigan game against Penn State. Go through a couple things, give you my final score prediction and all that kind of stuff. But this episode of Locked On Wolverines is brought to you by Sling TV. Don't miss this week's matchup with Penn State, Michigan versus Penn State, right here on Sling. Sling, the TV you love for a price you'll love. Try it today. Anyway, all right, so we are getting into the game here. Michigan, Penn State. I think it's very difficult to figure out exactly what's going to happen. I know that Penn State's had some tougher games, I think, than Michigan has, but sometimes, Michigan's game against Iowa, Michigan got up to 20-0 and then just kind of played keep away, or tried to and did not. If they would have got it to 27-0, it would have been easily game over. That game looked artificially close. The game against Maryland, artificially close. The game against Indiana, artificially close. And it wasn't really close. 31-10, not really that close. All three games saw Michigan assert itself in one half, or at least three quarters. Against Maryland, it was the second half that Michigan asserted itself. Against Iowa, it was the first three quarters that Michigan asserted itself, and then took the foot off the gas pedal. Against Indiana, it was the second half once again. Michigan can't afford, it's got to play somewhere in between, right? It's got to have to play a full game. It cannot afford to let Penn State do what our guest Zach Seiko said on Wednesday and just let Penn State get out to a hot start. You don't want to find yourself in the same situation as you did in Happy Valley in 2019 when Michigan had to mount a furious comeback and the defense stands strong late with the exception of one play. Can't do that. You've got to play a complete game. I do think Michigan is overall the better team, but Penn State's got just as much talent as Michigan at this point. The talent has caught up. Michigan probably has the better quarterback overall, but Michigan probably has the best player overall in Blake Corum. You look at yards per game, Corum is 7th, ironically right behind Zach Charbonnet. Two were on the same team in 2020. Penn State's obviously got Nick Singleton averaging 92.6 yards per game. He's 25th. Katron Allen is not in that top group. But Michigan also has, he's 98th, but Michigan also has Donovan Edwards, who they haven't had to unleash, and I mean that in a dualistic sense. He wasn't available to unleash for a couple weeks. And the last 2 weeks, they've just kind of lightly got him involved. Hasn't been like a big crazy thing. So when it comes to that, I think Michigan's got a lot more going for it offensively. When you look at receivers, I mean, Brenton, whatever his name is, I can't remember his name offhand. He's the one to really look out for. Let's do this a smarter way. While I'm looking at the names here. There's a better way than how I was just doing it. Obviously, Brenton Strange, their tight end, he's a guy you got to watch out for. Parker Washington's had some big games against Michigan, or at least he had a big game against Michigan. Really kind of came to life in that 2020 loss for the Wolverines in the COVID year. 9 receptions for 93 yards. He had a couple weeks later, he had 4 for 95. And then last year, 4 for 92. Not his best game, but I mean, pretty good. 23 yards per catch. That's pretty solid. And you look at what he's done this year. He hasn't had like a giant game, but Northwestern 4 for 73, Central Michigan 6 for 64, Auburn 4 for 58. He has been consistent. He's been a model of consistency at getting those yards. Michigan's got to stop those two, as well as Mitchell Tinsley, who's got 225 yards on the year. Obviously, if you're able to slow down Sean Clifford, that's the big thing. He's already got 1,030 yards so far on the season, but I mean, he's very inconsistent as usual. 62% on the year. You take a deeper look at what he presents. He was not great against Purdue or in a monsoon against Northwestern, but otherwise, Ohio, at Auburn, Central Michigan, he's been good. 70%, 73%, 64%. Those are his completion numbers. But how good is Ohio, Auburn, or Central Michigan? Or for that matter, Purdue or Northwestern. But then same thing can be said about Michigan. Michigan's had an extra game, figured things out. Penn State's been able to sit back and watch. So it's going to be an interesting matchup to see exactly how this ends up working out. How does Penn State attack Michigan? And is Michigan able to get any kind of pressure? As in the mailbag, we kind of went through some of the rushing defenses as well. We'll go through them again here, but some of the teams that they've faced haven't exactly been a murderer's row when it comes to rushing defenses. They've been able to run the ball on Auburn, who's 92nd in the country. They've been able to run the ball on, I don't see where Ohio's 99th in the country. Northwestern's 102nd. And missing the other one here. Purdue is a little bit better about that, and they're 17th in the country. But against Purdue, I don't believe they were able to run the ball that great. 32 carries, 98 yards, average of 3 yards per carry. So in the one game that they went up against a tougher rushing defense, they didn't even crack 100, which is what you're going to need if you're Penn State to beat Michigan. So that's good for Michigan. Keeping on that side of the ball before we move on, you look at sacks allowed, and they are still a little, they're okay. I mean, they've allowed 7 sacks. Michigan has allowed 8. So they're doing a heck of a lot better, but it still has had some moments where Sean Clifford's running around freaking out and whatever, but he's a little bit more composed. He's a little bit older. This is his 800th year in the league. It's amazing that he was around for things like the French Revolution and all of that stuff, and he's still playing college football, but that's where we're at. He's not going to be daunted by this environment, of course. He's played at Auburn. He's played at Michigan before. But, how do guys like Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, how do they fare? How does Parker Washington fare now that he's playing at the big house in front of fans? It's a different deal. Now, some of these guys, not the 2 freshman running backs, but some of these guys played at the Horseshoe last year. So they're not going to be that daunted necessarily by the environment. But Michigan is going to need its fans in it all the way through, which means if you are going to the game, don't be a loser. Wear maize. Be loud. No down in front. No, I'm just going to wear something blue because I like it. Just be a team player. We'll see if the maize out ends up being anywhere close to what it was against Washington last year. A little bit different because it's not 80 degrees outside. And it's a little harder to plan for when it's going to be like 35 in the morning and then 52 or so during the game. And windy, no less, which could bode well for the Michigan offense, Speaking of the Michigan offense, let's talk about the challenge that Michigan faces as far as that's concerned. But listen, this episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. It's the easiest place to spice up the college football season. It's so easy to get started and easy to play while you're watching your favorite team play. That's Michigan football if you're watching this, or Michigan State or Ohio State, because some of you are really weird. But listen, if you go to the Underdog website and you create an account, you can look at all of the different pick'em choices for Michigan or any other team right there. And then you can go and say, hey, I want Blake Corum against this tough run defense. I want Ronnie Bell, guy who knows how to get open, to have a big game in this particular week, because it seems like Luke Schoonmaker, can be really well involved. Those are the selections that I have, are those two guys in this game. I like Ronnie Bell to get over 80 yards. I think that makes sense. I think you look at Luke Schoonmaker, you're going to go over 4 or 5 catches. I think that's the way to go. I really think that is the way to do it. So go to Underdog, make your picks just like me. It's easy to play, and it's available in over 30 states. You just pick between 2 to 5 players across any team, not just Michigan, and decide if they'll finish higher or lower. It's one of the easiest fantasy games to play out there, and you can win cold hard cash in a single game. So sign up with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's all one word. And Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's deposit $100, get $100 free. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com and find the Underdog Fantasy app on the App Store or Google Play. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKEDON, all one word. Get in the college football pick'em action today. All right, so we went through some of these things here. When you look at, I'm going to look at the Big Ten very specifically here. We mentioned the sacks allowed. Penn State is third, and in that front, Michigan is fifth, having allowed 8. So one more sack allowed. A lot of those came earlier in the season, of course. So when you're looking at in conference play, Penn State's only allowed 1, Michigan's allowed 3. So they have been really good, and I think that balance has been really good when it comes to the run and the pass. Now, outside of that, though, Michigan's going to have to obviously try to do its best. I mean, Michigan leads the conference, and I believe, the conference at least in sacks with 22. Penn State, somewhat middling with 12. So they haven't been a team that's necessarily gotten after the quarterback. When it comes to in-conference play, 3. So Michigan should have an opportunity to protect, but I think the big thing is obviously that they're going to need to be able to run the ball. Penn State's rushing defense is 5th in the country. So that's pretty key. I mean, 5th in the country, that sounds daunting. They're allowing about 80 yards a game. Some teams have been able to run on them a little bit, but only 2 have cracked 100, Ohio and Auburn. Auburn carried the ball 36 times for 119 yards. The team's inability to run the football has been the big reason why Penn State's pass defense doesn't look as good. I want to reiterate, you sit there and you look 100-something, whatever. They're the 11th most passed on team in the country. When it comes to what they have allowed, it's a lot different. The pass defense is 11th in the country, allowing 5.8 yards per attempt. Now, Michigan is better still at that, number 4 in the country. But Michigan's also played, as far as its offense, has played some pretty decent teams. Michigan didn't pass a heck of a lot on Iowa after the first drive or whatever. They had their moments, but Iowa's the number 1 pass defense in the country when it comes to yards per attempt. So I think that when you look at what teams have tried to do against Penn State, it's throw the ball like 50 times and see if that works, because they haven't been able to run the ball as much as they would like. But given that Penn State has not had a lot of sack ability in Big Ten conference play against, they've only had 2 Big Ten opponents, Purdue as well as Northwestern. Not necessarily a murderer's row. Purdue's obviously okay, but 1 sack in those 2 games. Michigan really starting to come alive, but you've got to be able to get that pressure on that side. Okay, I keep on switching offense and defense. We need to try to stay offense here. It's going to be the big thing, and this is where talking to Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush earlier today, they both kind of said the same thing. They were like, Michigan's going to have to run, and they're going to have to establish the run. That's critical importance, but this is also the type of game that J.J. McCarthy needs to go out there and put the team on his back. That's the only way that you're going to be able to emerge from this game victorious from an offensive perspective. I like what Michigan has as far as its ability, several playmakers. This could certainly, as one of the question askers in the mailbag asked, could this be the Donovan Edwards game? Certainly feels like it could, because it allows more opportunities. Having the fact that they started showing against Indiana a backfield with both Corum and Donovan Edwards, it feels like foreshadowing, because now you essentially have in a way, a quadruple option. You could hand off to either running back. I mean, those actually maybe quintuple. You could hand off to either running back. JJ McCarthy could keep the ball. And you could also throw. So I guess 4. So it's 4. 4 options. You could also throw, you could also toss it to Donovan Edwards in space. He's got to be better about recognizing his keys, though. Because sometimes there's been a lot of times, and it seems weird whenever Michigan gets a guy who can run. Shea Patterson, now JJ McCarthy, and I mean, certainly we saw this as well with Dylan McCaffrey, where it's like they can run the football, and then they play a read option type, and then they keep when they should give and give when they should keep. He needs to be really good at this. Michigan certainly could go out there and run, really just put them in conflict and go nuts. I think Michigan's got way more capability than Penn State to dominate this game. But it's on Michigan's shoulders if it wants to. The next big thing is, and Michigan did a really good job of this in the second half, do not settle for field goals. If Michigan didn't settle for field goals against Iowa, and a lot of that had to do with Iowa's defense, then that game would have been out of hand in a hurry. I mean, what would have been 20-0 very well would have been, 28? Could have been 28-0. That game's done. I mean, it was done when it was 20-0 anyway, but it going into halftime, it could have been 21-0. Game is essentially done, especially Michigan first drive. And that's another thing Michigan's been really good at, and it's going to need to do again. First drive needs to be really smart, and they need on both the coming into the game as well as after halftime. They really need to continue to do what they've done, which is when they are unscripted, it looks really good. They need to be able to continue that. So, all right. I like Michigan's chances in this game. I think it's one of those things that, you look at this game going into the season, heck, even going into it last week, knowing that Penn State was on bye, there's no doubt in my mind that Michigan was going to win the game. And then you get into the week of, and you're like, oh, maybe, and it's just one of those weird things about college football where you sit there and try to figure out what's good. You think you have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. And then suddenly it feels a little daunting, right? Feels a little bit daunting. Anyway. Cringing at the pump to getting an eye-opening check at your favorite restaurant. Inflation is hitting us all where it hurts, and it really hurts. That's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. After having 2 road trips, I mean, that is a game changer. Drove to Iowa and back. That was super long. Drove to Indiana and, Bloomington and back. That was not quite as long, but it's awful. Nonetheless, cash back. Why not use it, right? If you drive, Upside's the answer. So get started. Use the free download the free Upside app today. Use my promo code LOCKED. You get $5 or more cash back with your first purchase of $10 or more. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with a credit card or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. So download the free Upside app today. Use the promo code LOCKED and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using the promo code LOCKED. All right, so how do I see this game going? I mean, I think that Penn State is going to give Michigan its first real test, its first real kind of gut punch earlier in the game. I think they're capable. They are not nearly as broken as they were when Michigan played them last year. But I do think that Michigan's lines will prevail. I think that as much as Penn State's offensive line seems improved, because here's the other thing that I want to look at. What has Purdue done? 65th in the country, 12 sacks. Okay. What has Ohio done? 52nd in the country, 13 sacks. Okay. Keeping in mind that, that's a moot point, so never mind. What has Auburn done? 65th in the country, 12 sacks. What has Northwestern done? 97th in the country, 9 sacks. Get the point? This is going to be the best front that they've seen. Michigan is 5th in the country, 22 sacks. I think Michigan will get enough done on the front side as far as it comes to the defensive line. Michigan, I think, will do a good job of slowing down Penn State's running game enough. I can't tell yet if what we saw against Maryland was an aberration. Keeping in mind, Michigan's going to sell out against the pass against a team like Maryland. But the pass defense has at times struggled, even when they've went to go kind of slow down the run, which they've done an amazing job of the last couple of weeks. However, I think it's one of those things you would rather negate a team's ability to run the ball and take your chances in the pass game, hope that your guys can make a play. And I think Michigan certainly has the athletes to be able to do that, then let a team just run all over you. I think Michigan will find a way to slow things down enough. We'll see if they manage to do that. I don't know if you can hear Zuri going nuts upstairs, but she's going nuts upstairs. It's on the other side. I think that this is where you see finally Michigan's offense really come alive in a way that it certainly we thought it could or would. It feels like a week when that would happen. I think Michigan's been kind of vanilla on purpose. I think there's a lot more in the tank. I think it's going to be a lot harder to run the football against Penn State, but I still think that they'll get over 100 yards. I think Blake Corum will get over 100 yards. I think that they'll keep Penn State off balance enough. I'm predicting on paper a close game, 24-17. I think that sounds about right. I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan won by 2 or 3 scores. I also wouldn't be surprised if Penn State won by about 1 score. But the key is get them out of their offense. Be efficient on offense yourself. Get them out of their offense. It hasn't necessarily worked great for Michigan. Sometimes Iowa, but it's worked great against Indiana. Worked. It was middling against Maryland. So this is it. This is where if Michigan wins this, then you can feel pretty confident that Michigan will likely be undefeated going into the Ohio State game, as long as there isn't a letdown along the way. But that's it. It's a late preview, but it is a preview nonetheless. All right, that's it. Going to do it for us today. We'll be back sometime after the game. Thank you for watching and or listening. We will talk to you then. Peace.